listening to Unfiltered with Muhammad Uncut, a podcast about personal growth and authentic leadership. If you're looking for tips on how to manage others, get ahead, and make your way up the corporate ladder, this is not the show for you. This podcast is about being of service to others, leading from the heart, and evolving into a better version of yourself. Each episode brings you motivated stories about unfiltered leadership and authentic leaders, those who involve others, use their influence to amplify diverse perspectives, and inspire teams to achieve collective results. If this sounds like you, keep listening. Hello and welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast, and welcome to my wonderful guest, my unfiltered guest, Heather Younger. Thank you very much for being my guest today, Heather.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
My pleasure to have you on here. The Unfiltered Podcast is all about self-transformation. It's about us becoming better leaders of ourselves so we can lead others, so we can really be the best people to help others grow, evolve, and become the better version of themselves. And who better to help people talk about that than somebody who talks about adversity and resilience. And we're going to talk to Heather about that, but a bit about who Heather is. So Heather Younger is a visionary. She started out as a lawyer before moving into the field of resilient leadership. She's the founder of CEO of Customer Fanatix, an organization that helps organizational leaders and their employees find their true vision through executive coaching, leadership roundtables, culture team facilitation, and scouring employees' engagement survey comments. I bet you have a lot of fun doing that. As a best-selling author, international speaker, focus group facilitator, podcast host, and Forbes Coaches Council coach, she has earned her reputation as the employee whisperer. Love to hear more about that, and I'm sure we will. She also believes that she was born to advocate and communicate on behalf of others, and from an early age, she realized that many dreams and desires never happen unless we are courageous enough to ask for them consistently and in a compelling way. Her TEDx talk has been viewed by thousands of people and has inspired many to challenge how they deal with adversity and challenge in their own life and how to transform adversity into an opportunity. So let's start right there. Heather, why is it important for us to have the mindset that what doesn't break us can actually make us better?
Wow. I mean, right now, I think it's even more important. It's interesting. We talk about, as leaders and us being able to lead other people, build, become resilient, build other people up and help them be resilient. I'm sitting outside because it's a beautiful sunny day in Colorado and I needed the sunshine. I knew what it was. I needed it and I sought it out and I didn't wait for anybody to tell me to go get it. And so I think that like right now we're faced with the nuttiest time we've had in recent history. Many of us are really losing our minds. People are so frustrated right now, so stressed out right now. The unknown is piercing for most of us. And so our ability to say, okay, what is the reality? But then what kind of reality can we create out of what's right in front of us? So someone said to me the other day, you have so much going on. How do you do it all? Well, I mean, yes, it can be stressful doing as much as I do. But you know what it does for me is because I know I'm getting to an end goal. And so because I'm getting to end goal, it helps me to basically get all the other stuff, the junk that's in the world, and just get it out of the way, clear the fray and focus forward. And so focusing forward is a kind of a big strategy I use. And to be honest, what many people who have actually gone through different levels of adversity have done, they just find a way to kind of go forward, focus forward, moving forward. And when you can do that, then it's easier to take all the other stuff away. And it's important for us to be able to do that right now.
Heather, am I wrong in assuming that we have two choices when we're faced with adversity? We face it or we walk away. Is there a middle ground?
I think like not everything has to be charge, you know what I mean? Sometimes I may lead on to that type of mindset where it has to be, you see the adversity and you just run into it right now. I don't necessarily think it's that. I think we have to be thoughtful about how we approach an adverse situation. And so I think there is a middle ground. I think there's many middle grounds. And I don't think there's like necessarily one way. I always share my strategies and what I have done and continue to do. but I don't think there's one way. And the other thing I need to say when we deal with adversity is that it's not something that just goes over our heads. We actually need to sit in it. We kind of have to rest in it. We have to recognize it and not just try to like run past it. And I think that's if people tell you, oh yeah, I just ignored it all, it's just, no, I don't think that's the case. I think we'd all figure out a way to deal with it. But in the end, we have to recognize it exists. We even have to recognize the impacts it may initially have on our mindset. And then we have to decide what we're going to do with it and move past it and reframe it.
Right. And you talk about that. I know in your TED Talk, you talk about reframing. And I think that's a powerful way to approach adversity and challenges in our life, because to what you were just describing, we can either face it head on and then fall and pick ourselves back up, or we can pretend it doesn't exist or run the other way. But help me understand what happens when we reframe it. What changes in our mindset, or what changes in us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the process for reframing is it actually, I didn't create it. So let's just say that this is something that therapists have done for years and years and forever to help their patients get through tough times. Right. And I was just doing it on my own because I had to find ways to overcome many different things in my childhood. And so I found it as a way for me to do it. And so I think the reframing part happens is recognizing this thing is in front of us, allowing ourselves to have the feeling of whatever that thing is, whatever that thing makes us feel. And then the reframing is intentionally taking that reality and pretty much flipping on its head. Taking the reality and saying, it's not saying, oh, this reality didn't happen. Oh, this reality was like 100% positive. What it's saying is, how can we take a piece of the reality, and maybe it's just one piece of a very big picture, and hone in on that one thing that can be the thing that moves us forward. Okay. So for me, for example, I realized that I didn't have a voice. I was, people weren't asking my opinion when I was a child. There were a lot of things happening around me. And I knew, though, that in order for me to get anywhere in life, I couldn't continue to show up in a way that just sat there and let things happen to me. And I needed to be able to develop a voice. I needed to be able to communicate in a way that was effective. I needed to be able to build relationships of trust with people. And all those things are the things that when I realize it, I built those things, and it helps me to this day kind of go forward, right? And the other idea of empathizing. I mean, I am an empath, and it could take a lot of energy to be that kind of person, but I am that person because of my adversity. And I see my empathy and my ability to be empathetic with other people and compassionate as a true gift from above. And so because of that, I just, again, I know where it came from. I don't really think I was born with it. I actually think it was a kind of nature nurture type of situation that was a requirement, because I knew what it felt like when someone did not show compassion towards me.
And so you've been intentional all along. And I this is something that resonates with me, and I completely agree. If we can be in tune to what our body and our minds are telling us, when we can choose to become more empathetic, we will walk down that path. A lot of the time we become victims because of circumstances that are beyond our control, but how we react to those circumstances are within our control. So we either act or be acted upon. So, this isn't to discredit people who have been butchered by circumstances outside of their control. People have been victimized, and to minimalize and say, no, there's no such thing as victimization. There is. Yes. But I believe that there is still a power within us, so we can recognize that adversity. And I love the way that you reframed it, because even the word itself, adversity. And what you did is you took that adverse, and you still, you put it back again. You turned it again. That, hey, you've come to turn my world upside down, adversity, but I'm going to turn you even further, and maybe upside right. And I don't know, I don't want to go right and wrong. There isn't a right or wrong, but there is a way that sits with us, acknowledging what it is, knowing it, facing it, naming it, and being able to move forward. And I know you mentioned you've had difficulties in your life. We all have. I know you also acknowledge that. We all have challenges, adversity, but no one lives our narrative. No one writes our narrative. And so we have to learn to deal with it. Was there a time when it was obvious for you that, hey, I have to do things differently? Could you remember a particular moment when that change when you were able to turn adversity upside down and move in a different direction?
I think I've taken these, many of us, right, do this often. And I do remember an exchange I had. There's lots of little exchanges, but I remember on one line of the adversity, like the one that I share, let's say in the TED Talk on the racism of my own family, I had a conversation with my grandmother. I'd just come back from Israel, and I'd gone there for 2.5 months, and it was literally a search for me. It was a search for, like, is everybody like my family? Is this? I just can't believe it, because my personality is like, I always believe the good in people. So I'm like, I can't believe everybody's like this. So I go, and I'm like, it was an amazing experience. And I got to stay on a kibbutz, and I got to stay in the Arab sector, and I got to stay had so many diverse experiences while I was there. So I got back, and I was talking to my grandmother about it. And she went off on me because I was talking in a positive way about folks. It's called the Arab sector there. At least it was then. I don't know what it is now, but that's what it was called back then when I went. This is 1994. And I was talking about that group, and oh my gosh, they're just amazing people. So gracious, so hospitable. Oh, I love them. And then I said something like this. Okay, so anybody I offend, sorry, but I said something like this. And I was there, and I found very little differences between the Jews and those who were not Jewish. I actually thought they kind of looked alike. It was weird, and they were all so hospitable. She got so, oh my goodness, don't you dare say that a Jewish person looks like this. And it was, and it ended with her saying to me, in this whole weird convoluted thing, you'd be a better Heather if your parents never married. And I was like, I was like 23 at that time. And I was like, you know what? And I was in law school, and I had this conversation. So it was like first summer of law school after coming back from that thing. And I went, wow, I can become an astronaut. I could be the first to discover cancer. I could do whatever. And no matter what, I won't be good enough. No matter what, I will not be included. And that was it was like, boom. Heather, stop trying that. You are good at, like, it's like having to rework the brain, but to realize, like, I had done it, but then at the same time, she pushed me to go to law school. Like, I wouldn't even be where I was then or today if it wasn't for her. So there were all these, I had to go, boom, boom. Wow. This person who did this also did this for me. I wouldn't be this person today if she hadn't done this thing to me yesterday. Right. So I think that's the reframing part. It happened a lot, but that was like a huge turning point in my mind. And since that point, every time I started to manage people after law school. And so after I was in leadership positions, and people would be presented with certain situations, and I would always go, yeah, but, and I would be there like, yeah, but person, always uplifting them and helping them find the brighter side. And I would do that, to be honest. I can do that with a racist. Okay. So this is going to sound weird, but because of my background, I can see the smallest of positive changes, and even what most people might think the worst of people. I can see the light inside of a person who doesn't see it in themselves. It is a gift. I do not take it for granted, but it's something that because of that, I do the work I do. It makes me super valuable because I'm able to look that deep without being offended by what it is. It's happening. It's inside of them. They have their own baggage. I separate their stance, their frame, their baggage, and I say, wow, let's go deeper right there. And people are like, what?
Isn't that something that as a coach you need? I mean, it's, speaking to the converted, but you need that gift and that skill. But, for the benefits of those who are listening, your background, your mother is Jewish, your grandmother is Jewish. So the grandmother in question, Jewish, the Jewish lineage goes through, it's a maternal,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And your father is Black, and he's not Jewish, he's Christian, I believe.
Yes.
So, you would have been a better Heather if the Jew didn't marry the Christian. And, we're talking about in the maybe 80s.
We
don't want to, we're all 20 something.
You can date me.
Yeah. All right. And so even today, even though it's more prevalent, it's still, people will still look like that. Right. I know I'm Muslim, and, if you get certain people in a room, people will look. And what I love about how you reframed it is not only were you able to recognize, let's call it a shortcoming, if you allow me to say that about your grandmother, right? But that person who had her shortcomings, and we all have our own shortcomings, also had so many gifts that she gave you. You didn't discredit somebody that really discredited you and did not make you feel like you belonged. And even, when I unpack her comment, it's like, well, you shouldn't have been born. Gee, it's not even about being
Yes.
included. It's like, you shouldn't even be here, right? But you didn't hold that against her.
I
And that goes
didn't,
back,
no.
right? The whole
Now, it didn't hurt
victimization thing.
less. It didn't hurt less when she said it,
Right.
and it doesn't hurt less when I say it out loud again.
Today. But you owned it, Heather.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And maybe you didn't own it as gracefully as maybe you're owning it now.
I
But
was
you
like,
owned it.
well, I can tell you my response. I was like, well, what? And I mean, at this point, I'm in law school, so I'm really breaking down sentences, right? This is what I'm like in school to do, is to break down things, like find it. And I'm like, what did I just hear you? And she said, yes, you'd be better, Heather. And I'm like, I wouldn't even be me. Like, what are you talking about, woman?
Yeah. But you know, it didn't hold you back. You're here and you continue to grow. And I think your grandmother remained a part of your life.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Right? She helped get you
she
into
loved
law
me
school.
dearly.
So,
Oh my goodness. It was a crazy, it's just, again, when I think about, I know the average person's like, who is this person that could forgive a person who does that, could see the bright side and the positive. And like, all I can really say is that it's a gift that not many of us have, that ability to forgive in that context and to be able to, at that same time, raise the person up. It's just not an easy thing to do. It's just not. I know it. Well, so it sounds weird. It is weird.
It's easy today to look at the other, and you know, for non-racist, for anti-racist people, I hope I could be considered an anti-racist, because you know, I guess the conversation today is, you're racist or anti-racist. There's no in between. So for anti-racists, those who consider themselves anti-racist, it might be easy to look and say that person is racist, therefore, and then put a bunch of negatives behind their name. You choose to embrace that person. And as you said, you see the light. Where there's darkness, you see light. If that person has even 2%, you know, goodness in them, you will find it and you'll reframe it and you'll help raise that person. Forgiveness, I believe, doesn't only do the other person good, it does us better. And I want to go there with you, right? How has it made you better?
I think the forgiveness part allows me to help others forgive others. Like, so it's, I am this intermediary of life. Like with my kids, I do this, with my friends, I do this, with my coaching clients, I do this, like everywhere I go, and I serve that role of helping people see not only the brighter side of a situation, but the brighter side of an interaction, or the brighter side of a possibility. So even if I'm speaking with a leadership team and they're like, oh no, we can't. And I go, wait, don't a second. Here's something you haven't really thought about. And it's because they don't have my same lens. We all have different lenses, right? And that's the unique gift that I personally I bring in my shoes, of saying, I hear you. Yes, actually, by the way, that's bad. The thing you said is bad. It's very bad. Okay, now let's put that aside. Now let's move forward in a new light. And here's the light. This is how we can look at it now. And it's hard for most people to do that, but it's just being able to go to just draw that line and take this and put this over here in this closet, and over here continue to move forward. And so I think that's how it's helped me, is I do it for myself and I'm able to help others. So it uplifts me to uplift others.
You know, as you mentioned that, I think of the yes and, you know, as coaches and trainers, we're always said, yes and, right? But you know what? I think the yes but is equally important and required sometimes, because when you are dealing with a racist, the yes and may be hard to reframe and take that person so out of. I'm trying to remember the story. I listened to it here on CBC Canada. It was about a person in the States who infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan, and he's Black. And he was right. And he was telling this story. He had a converted person from the Ku Klux Klan, right? You don't go into that with a yes and attitude, like, oh, you're racist. And no, you go in there, you're racist, but right? Like, let's face it, sometimes I think sometimes we get into these nuanced and new ways of doing things, and then we forget that sometimes the hard truth hurts. And we need the but.
I remember just recently doing a training on emotional intelligence with law enforcement in California. And it was the second time I'd been with them in a couple of year period. And there were a couple people on the screen that were visually super uncomfortable, because there was so I had done my training, we were good. I could sense some, discomfort, but then at the same time, we were about to go into some racial justice issues. And when that popped up, the people on the screen got super uncomfortable. A couple people did, couple of the officers. And as I watched it, I could see the body language change, and I felt, this is going to sound weird, but I felt them. I felt their frustration because they were definitely the odd man out, and the one was a man, one was a woman. So it wasn't, they were the odd man and woman out. And they were frustrated because they didn't understand why people didn't see their view. And while I could have easily taken on their negative body language and then started to get all crazed over it, given that I'm a person of color, I didn't, because I was reading them and figuring out what can I say to them? What can I remind them of in our previous training about what emotional intelligence is? And in this case, it was all about how, self-regulation. How do we manage our emotions when we're faced with new information, new interactions that are counter to what we're feeling? How do we handle that? And I'm not saying I'm perfect at that, because believe me, I'm not. In the workplace, I'm like 100%. I'm really good at that. At home, I suck. I really suck. I'm not going to lie to you. And so I have this ability to regulate in the environment, but at home, I'm not great at it. So, but with them, I was like, how can it's so much of these issues related to racism has so much to do, there's baggage, there's luggage, there's the stuff all our lenses, all the stuff we were taught, all the stuff's in the media, like all these things, right? When we talk about the institutional side of things. And then it's like, we can make a choice to kind of back ourselves up and have some self-awareness about how we're presenting and what we're feeling when we hear the stimuli, whatever that is. And then we choose how that next step's going to look for us. What is that next step going to be? It's that level of intentionality that I talked about in that TED Talk that I exercise in my life that really does make the difference in these conversations that are super tough, really tough. I mean, when my grandmother said that thing, I was like, she went way off, and I was like, holy moly, what did I do to make her go way off? I hit a nerve. I didn't intend to, but in the end, I was kind of like, these people are amazing. So all the stuff you were thinking about them, like, you are so wrong, lady. I kind of wanted to get to her. I got to her, and I don't know why I was so surprised by her response. Oh gosh, but
I definitely want to go a little deeper in a moment and ask you why it's different for you at home. But to the point that you just made there, all I could think about as I was listening to you and really trying to ingest the entire feeling of it is that when we are dealing with people who are at the end of various extremes, we talked, I don't get political on here, but we talked about Jewish and Muslim. We talk about black and white, and we talk about, racist America, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to hit a nerve. How do we take somebody that killed George Floyd and reform them? How do we take people that are committing these crimes, and they are crimes, by the way, like George Floyd was murdered. How do we take, how do we take people that are holding, guns face to face to each other and are hurting each other over ideologies, over land, whatever the reason is, they're hurting each other, they're hurting others. So we can continue to fight. We can continue to have the ideologies that tear us apart and build the walls, or we can become the bridges of connection. How do we reframe and use the conversation and the technique that you're talking about, this reframing technique, so that I can look at somebody that is completely at odds with what my beliefs are, but I can embrace them. I can find that light with them. How do you do that? To those people that don't find it as easy as you, don't have that gift, how did they do it, Heather? Because we got to do it. It's now or never.
We do. That is why it's interesting, because people say, well, we talk about emotional intelligence like way too much, like it's overdone. It may be overdone, but it's overdone the wrong way. Because I feel like there are the core tenets. I mean, folks that came up with that many years ago, and with Daniel Goleman kind of being the continuation of that, and then many of us practitioners out there who are continuing to talk on these topics. I think there's some basic human things that, for example, that gentleman who put that pressure on George Floyd's neck, he just didn't have. He didn't have the ability to step out of his shoes and put himself in the other person's shoes. He didn't have empathy. He didn't have compassion. He didn't have it in him. He didn't have it in him, at least initially. And here's the thing about change in any of these things. You got to want it. You got to see a hole, and you got to have a desire to fill the hole. And then you got to be prepared to go do the work. And he had no awareness, obviously. And even if we did have an awareness, he didn't have a desire to change. He didn't want to take it in. So I think that the key, like for me, I see myself as almost like, it's almost a ministry in a way to talk about emotional intelligence with folks, because when I'm training, and especially in the law enforcement space, because I feel like, gosh, if I could just help one person stop before they act, think, and about the other like, boom, like stop just for a millisecond. Like what could I change a life, right? Could I change a life? Could I save a life? Because now this person who was previously not armed with the ability to stop and say, and scan and to regulate, now maybe has one or two more strategies that can do that might want, maybe not shoot somebody. So I feel like, in many cases, it is a strategy, a lack of strategy on the part of the people who are doing these things. So there's this whole background there. So yes, there's a background of fear and hate, and there's all these things that we don't really know. We have to dig into each person's story. I hate stereotypes. I hate stereotypes on any front. I hate stereotypes of all white people. I hate stereotypes of all black people. I hate it. So because I don't like that, you're not going to ever see me in a place where I go, and all racists are here, and all people are here. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in it because I've seen individually the power of bringing people together who maybe who didn't see each other's side, and because they had an openness or they had the awareness there, they could start to see it a little more. Are they going to come completely to your side? Are they going to stand in the middle and say, I want to come forward? Maybe not in every case, but my goal is like, I know I'm not going to change every person in the world, but I can change the world one person at a time.
I love that. You're not going to change every person in the world, but you can change the world one person at a time. And I think you can do that so well because you're not starting from a scarcity model. You are even looking at somebody who in this situation, and you refer to the man who knelt on George Floyd's neck and killed him. You still look at him as someone who is worthy of, recovery of you didn't look at him as someone who was outed from mercy. You looked at him as, it was this abundance model that this person, as a human being, I can still reform him. I can still find the light within him. And if I can draw that light out, it's so easy to look at the other, to look at people with different ideologies, or people who are hurting us, people who victimize us and blame and shame and point the finger and compartmentalize them into the bad people, stereotype them, right? Because their actions speak to that. But I think when we start judging the action and not the person, the action can change, the behavior can change. The person is the person. But that person is not always a reflection of those behaviors, because those behaviors, when you couple them with values that are humane and recognize our shared humanity, then I think you can start changing that person. Let me go back.
I know that's deep.
But you know what? And I know it's something that you deal with, because to be able to see the light in even the darkest places, you have to go deep, don't you, Heather?
You do have to, yes.
Yeah. So how do you
Not
do
everybody's
that?
Comfortable with that.
No. And here's, because it sounds like you and I are talking about the bigger problems of the world. But you know what? These problems exist at work. When we bring our biases to work, when I'm a Muslim and I bring a bias against someone who is not like me, or I'm a Jew and I bring a bias to somebody not like me, or I'm white, or I'm black, or I'm woman, or I'm gay, or I'm straight, and I see others who are different than me. Now I show up at the workplace, and because they are different than me, I don't see them either as good as what as me, or they can't do what I can do. I don't hire them. They don't even get the job. They don't get the job done. I don't celebrate them. So taking that conversation that you and I are having, which seems, to change the world one person at a time, how do you now take it to change one person in a work environment so that they become better leaders, better people, better human beings?
I feel like so much of what I talk about, when I talk about, maybe you're talking big picture, and I know oftentimes I can completely overwhelm people. It's like I tell people, like, I think that anybody who comes in, who stands in front of me or who is around me, that they deserve my service. Like, I should be serving them. So that, like, my view of even customer service and a customer experience is like way bigger than most, because I think every single person that's in front of me is my customer. And so if you think of the level of respect that a customer gives, because of course they pay the bills in your organization, right? They're the ones who pay the employees to make the train keep going forward. There's an obligation that's there. So if I see every person in front of me as really deserving of that level of obligation, of focus, of attention, of empathy, of compassion, of help, of support, of whatever, right? It can be overwhelming to most, but for me, it makes it easy. Because even if the person is, again, someone who people are like, oh, this person's a jerk, that person's a that, I seek out the thing I need to help them with. Mm-hmm. I know I'm there. I was put in front of them to do the thing I was put to do, that I was supposed to be doing. And so because I see like my life as a mission, and I see my relationships with people, my interactions with people as like a mission, it makes it easier for me to see and kind of ignore or put aside, like I just said, take that bad stuff and put it in the closet and just handle this, even if it's a super narrow lens of the person, and say, okay, what can I do with now this person? We can do some stuff here. We got it here, right? And that's what we do. What I did with law enforcement. It's like we talked to it, and it's like, yes, these folks might perceive you as negative in the community. Yes, they may perceive you as racist and all these other things. Okay, sure, that might be true. Now let's put that aside. What can you control? What is it that you could influence, and what is it that you can control? And now let's talk about that. And now let's start visualizing what this new world is like with our new mindset of what we can influence and we can control. And that makes all the difference in any situation that we're faced with. And I would say that right now with the pandemic. So yes, it's bad. People are dying. We all pray that we aren't one of them. People are losing jobs. Money is being lost. I'm not going to try to say, I'm not ignoring this. Again, the reframe process is not about ignoring the reality. The reality can be awfully bleak.
In fact, I think you're facing it head on when you're reframing it. You're just deciding to change the perspective.
Yes. So what you're doing is you're taking that, all this rational stuff, that's the irrational things that go around it. Oh my gosh, my entire family's going to get it. We're all going to die, which could, by the way, happen. Like, I mean, right. In the end, it could, right? But how extreme is that? And really, how likely is it? Like, let's just be real. How likely is it? Okay, so that's irrational. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get another job now that I've been furloughed. And we go down this thing. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And we're in a pit. So once you get to the point where like, you've done some oh my goshes, you need to stop the oh my goshes. Let's reverse the oh my goshes. And now let's start to say, right? Like, now we're stopping that.
You just turned oh my gosh into a verb. I love it. I like that. Don't oh my gosh me.
Don't oh my gosh. So that we're stopping now. Okay. And now let's move forward. And I think that's the constant. I find myself constantly, I do that now even more with my teenage children, because like my daughter's like, the world's going to end. And I'm like, no. Okay. No man, no woman, no person in an office is ever going to be your savior, is ever going to save your world. Is never like, it's just not happening. Again, in the very extreme movie theater version, perhaps, but in our world, things get a little different here and there depending on who's in and out. But in the end, your world is not ending. And I think
we adapt.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just rethink. Think about this differently. Let's think about all these things that you have become more resilient. Oh my gosh, look at all these things you've been able to do. So you start to load on all the positives on top of this crap that's all over the place.
Right.
And now you're like, okay, now I'm not saying it's all positive and the sun is shining all the time and the birds are chirping all the time. That's not what I'm saying after you reframe. I'm still not saying that. I'm just saying that now you see the thing in front of you in a different light and you see a path forward.
Well, Heather, 9 months ago, when we were just into our first lockdown, here in Ontario, we're it's about 1,400 cases that are reported a day. And those numbers have never been that high. And it's not that they're not scary, but we've adapted, and it's because we're resilient. And we're not sugarcoating it. We're not reframing it and ignoring certain things. We're saying, you know what? I can't live with the fear that could happen. It could. But I can take measures to make that, that ability or the instance less likely, right? I could wear a mask. I could do whatever the health practitioners tell me to do better, right? So I don't have to put myself in the midst of the negativity, and I don't always have to carry this cloud of unknowing and pain and fear and worry, because that is probably going to dig a deeper grave than anything that's out there, right? But let me come back to what you said earlier about, you are one thing at work and another at home. Is that a mother thing? Is that a parent thing? What is it that allows you to have this different persona at home, and how different is it?
Well, my persona is the same. It's my ability to control my emotions is not. So like, I'm still that caring person. Like if you'd ask my kids, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I go to my mom, like, mom, if I need to talk to mom, I talk to somebody, I talk to mom. If I need mom to help me work, if I need someone to work something out, I go to mom. Like those same things that show up at work still are there. So what I mean is this ability to control the emotions. So there's this idea of safety. And let's just be clear, I present as a Black woman. And if I'm at work and I were not to control my emotions, and we think about stereotypes, I can't stand stereotypes. So because I can't stand them, I definitely don't want to perpetrate them. Okay, so for me, that's just me. Again, this is my lens. I don't want to be that mad Black woman. So I don't go crazy when things are happening. Like I remember being at a time when I was at a conference table. I was sitting around a conference table with people. I'm the only one who looks like me in most cases, and in this case, that was the case. And I was coming to present information from a large customer to this organization, and the customer was not happy. So I had to deliver this news to this team of people who love them, but they needed some training in emotional intelligence, so that their ability to regulate and kind of not to stay the course. They wanted to just go off, and they looked at me. I remember my boss looked at me and said, "Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you, Heather? Why aren't you responding?" And there were two reasons. One is what I just told you, what I just disclosed, that I didn't want to perpetuate a stereotype. So I needed to appear more control of my emotions. And number two, the customer was not at the table. I was in their place, and I was offended because I was standing in the shoes of remember, I told you I have the ability to step out of my shoes and be in the shoes of another. So I'm sitting at the table in the shoes of the customer as these people are cackling and laughing and talking all this stuff about me when I'm bringing in millions of dollars to the organization. And then they're asking me why I'm not angry about this. Like I'm not going off the rails. So I was like, in my mind, I'm like, you're doing more than enough without me. I don't need to join in. And it just would irritate them because this would happen, not all, when this would happen, it wouldn't happen all the time. But when it did, people would always question, like, why aren't you, where's your response?
Right. So that element of surprise, you're breaking the stereotype and you're being a better ambassador to who you are and who you represent. And I know, as a Black woman, you don't have to go around and represent all Black women, but let's face it, if somebody hears the name Muhammad, right?
Yes,
people are going to say, oh, one of them, right? And I've had people say, right? And, people see a Black woman and they can see it. So the way to start breaking and chiseling away at breaking that stereotype is by not enforcing that stereotype, not reinforcing it, right? So let me ask you this.
So it's exhausting being that person too, by the way. It's exhausting. So it's exhausting. Yeah. Like it's exhausting to be like the impact person I am too, where I'm taking on all these people's stuff, but it's also super exhausting to be the person who can't go off the rails.
Right. Because you're also not expressing yourself. Sometimes it really is good to that primal scream, like, right. Right. Like it's actually good. It's good. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess before I ask you this question about your mission, I want to ask you, you mentioned about talking to, law enforcement and sometimes people who are also within a stereotypical, people that we've compartmentalized, boxed up and said, this is what they're like. And today these stereotypes are fanning the flames of, that are burning all of us. So when you have this conversation with them, how responsive are they?
Well, they're very responsive because I'm a person telling them not to be a victim. So I always start off by sharing them my story. They see I could be a victim, but I chose not to. Mm-hmm. So when they're coming to me with this like victim thought, anybody coming to me with a victim mentality or a victim sentiment, I'm going to let them know what my background, and my background includes way more victim possibilities than what I've already disclosed. And when I share that victimhood, and then I say, but I chose to step out of those shoes and to be a different person and to choose to be empowered, self-empowered. Then they're like, wow, I have no excuses. Where are my excuses at? Because Heather just took them away.
But that's the resilience, I think, right? Is being able to step out of that stereotype and face it head on.
It is, but when they see it from someone who you would think to be the victim. Like
Right.
when you think this way, plus hear, so you're seeing what I look like, you're hearing the story, you're aligning these things together, and you're going, you know, wow, this would be like who this person should be, and she's not that person, or he's not that person. Then it's like, holy smokes, like I have just lost all my excuses. You see those videos we see like on LinkedIn, and there's like folks who have lost all their limbs, and they are competing on this and that, and you're like, okay. The fact that I have this little cold, or the fact that I don't get this client or whatever, is like, who am I all of a sudden, you know? So it's just that kind of, that same effect that happens. So I think, you know, the ability for me to be the empath. So to me to listen closely and to dig deep about what their concerns are. And at the same time, not give them an excuse, not allow the victimhood to take place.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two things that I kind of face nonstop. I'm listening, I'm empathizing, I'm hearing you, I'm standing with you. And now guess what you and I are going to do together? We're throwing that away.
Right.
We're moving this way now. And that's just a different, you know, again, it's a different frame. We all just,
you're breaking the mold, really. You're reframing the reframing. So
pretty much.
So let me ask Heather, what is a 4-letter word that describes your mission? I think I know what it is, but I'd like to hear, what is that 4-letter word that describes what gets you out of bed and gets you to do the work that you do?
4 letters. Okay.
It says unfiltered, but I have a feeling that this word will probably be on the safe side.
I mean, I guess we could say hope. I mean, I wouldn't say that's a word I use in most of I write, things like that. I would say, yeah, I 4 letters. That's hard. Hope would be the only thing I can think of, because I'd probably say intentional would be like everything that I'm defined by. Right. Like there's very little accidents that happen.
And I have no doubt that you are intentional. And that what I heard from you repeatedly today is love. To be able to look in those dark places, to be able to look at people who have put you in a dark place, to be able to move beyond and to take people with you to the lighter side. I think we can only do that in love. And you know, I appreciate you. I appreciate you for finding enough love to transform the people you work with and the people that you speak with. Because at the end of the day, if we don't come from a place of love, maybe we can't even reach hope, and we can't, it gets a little very difficult to continue being intentional. So I want to ask you, you mentioned that you've got a technique for this reframing. And this is where the part of the podcast that I call the Unfiltered Thought of the Week, right? So you, Heather, please, could you share with the listeners, what is one thing that they could do to become better empaths, to be able to seek that light more intentionally, to be able to draw it out in people, maybe even in people that they think are sitting at the other extreme, like, you know, people who might be their enemies, people who have put them in, people who have caused us to kneel and to maybe even take away our humanity and humility. What would you share to help us to draw out that light?
I would say start with the small stuff. So, instead of trying to like step out of your shoes and put yourself in the shoes of someone who's like, who you might perceive as like super horrible or very adverse or different than you, right? Start with small things. Like, could you do that with your spouse? Could you do that with your child? So I would say that it literally, if I have to help people do it, and this is a mind thing. So almost every single thing I talk about is the mind, and then everything else, the behaviors follow from that. So it is in my mind, literally almost taking myself out of my own body. I'm stepping out of my shoes and turning around and stepping into the other person's shoes and then looking back at myself.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. It's in your mind. You have to do that. It's a transformative experience when you do. And a big part of this is shutting your mind down to like everything else that's around it, because you can't allow something in if you don't clear away the fray, or you have to clear away the junk. And then you're able to step out and step in and see it in a whole different other light. Right. And that, I think that's the only way to do it until you can truly empathize with someone. So that's the first step, because compassion is an extension of empathy. Compassion is the action behind empathy. And so until you're able to step out of your place, your lens, your frame, your history, all the things your parents taught you, all the stuff you've watched in the news, like you gotta step out of that and into their place. And as they talk, you live their experience.
Wow.
And then you remove yourself and say, okay, now and people say, no, you can't empathize with people. You can't. Nope, you don't know what I'm going through. I disagree. But that's because I deeply empathize and I deeply remove myself and put myself with them. It's more than solidarity. I mean, I'm in their shoes.
Well,
and it's not easy, and it takes a lot, and it can be exhausting.
And what really just transformed me when you said that is looking back and looking at myself. Because so many times we step into other people's shoes, and as we're told, walk around in somebody else's shoes. But it's not just about walking around in those shoes. I think that's half the journey. The journey is to be able to look back and glance at ourselves and how do we see ourselves. And isn't that why relationships break down? I think of sometimes sitting across the table from my wife, and when we start talking in language through the lens of me, myself, what I need, right? You need to do this, change, and all this sort of stuff, right? And I use my wife as an example because the people that are closest to us, we take for granted and think it's easiest to ask, to say to them, you need to do this, right? We hopefully we don't do that at work. We take much more liberty in doing it with people that we cohabit with and love, and right. But I think to be able to say how I'm being perceived even by those who love me, how can I step into their shoes and have that incredible deep look back at myself through the eyes of someone else. That, Heather, today is going to just help me to sit and focus and think about how do I do that? Because you're right, it's not that easy. It's going to take a lot of work.
It's not easy for me either. The looking at myself part is not as easy as stepping into the other. It's much easier for me to be in their shoes and understand their experience, and for me to look back at myself and say, how am I relating to that experience?
Well, it's scary because what if you don't like what you see? Or maybe that's maybe that's the start, and maybe that's the opportunity to grow. If we don't like what we see, well, then we've got a lot of work to do. Wow.
As we all do.
As we all do. Heather, thank you for sharing your stories, your unfiltered self, your authentic you. I appreciate you. And I thank you for being my unfiltered leader. Really my unfiltered leader today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.
Be well.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered, the show about authentic leadership and personal growth. Like what you heard? Click subscribe, share it, and tell a friend about it. And don't forget to leave a rating.